The fluorescent lights of St. Mary's emergency room buzzed overhead, casting everything in that particular shade of institutional white that made even healthy people look half dead. I pressed my palm against the cold linoleum wall, steadying myself as another wave of exhaustion threatened to buckle my knees. Lily's small hand squeezed mine tighter, her fever-bright eyes looking up at me with the kind of trust that simultaneously gave me strength and broke my heart. "Mommy, my throat hurts," she whispered, her voice raspy and small. "I know, baby. I know." I smoothed her damp hair back from her forehead, feeling the heat radiating from her skin. 103 degrees when I'd checked an hour ago. The walk-in clinic had sent us straight here, their faces grave as they'd written "possible scarlet fever" on the referral form. The intake nurse had already delivered the news with the practiced sympathy of someone who delivered bad news 100 times a day. Blood work, IV antibiotics, possibly overnight observation. My insurance, the bare-bones catastrophic plan that was all I could afford working double shifts at the diner, would cover maybe 30%. The rest would be out of pocket. I'd counted the bills in my wallet 3 times during the cab ride here, as if the numbers might change if I was persistent enough. $52.37. Everything I had until Friday's paycheck, which was already spoken for by our landlord, who'd been patient about last month's rent, but made it clear there wouldn't be a third extension. Ms. Chen, a young doctor with kind eyes and tired shoulders, appeared in the doorway, clipboard in hand. "Can we step over here for a moment?" I glanced at Lily, who had started to doze against my side despite her discomfort. The waiting room was nearly empty at this hour, just past midnight on a Tuesday, and an elderly woman 2 seats over gave me an encouraging nod, the kind of silent communication between mothers that transcended words. "I'll watch her, honey," she said softly. "You go on." I followed the doctor to a small consultation alcove, my heart hammering against my ribs with the kind of fear that had become my constant companion over the past 2 years. Ever since David had walked out, leaving behind nothing but empty promises and an eviction notice, I'd learned to recognize the specific tone medical professionals used when they were about to tell you something expensive. "Your daughter's labs came back," Dr. Martinez said, his voice gentle but professional. "It's definitely strep throat, but a particularly aggressive strain. We need to start her on IV antibiotics immediately, and I'd strongly recommend keeping her overnight for observation. Her fever is high enough that I'm concerned about potential complications." The words washed over me like ice water. IV meant a bed. Overnight meant charges I couldn't begin to calculate. Antibiotics meant pharmacy costs on top of everything else. "How much?" The question came out steadier than I felt. "Ballpark, just so I know what I'm looking at." Dr. Martinez glanced at his clipboard, and I saw the moment he decided to be honest rather than optimistic. "With your insurance, probably $1,500 out of pocket. Maybe $2,000 if she needs a second night." The number hung in the air between us, impossible and absolute. I might as well have told me she needed $2 million. The gap between $50 and $1,500 was a chasm I had no way to cross. "And if I just take her home?" I asked, hating myself for even asking. "With oral antibiotics?" His expression shifted from professional to genuinely concerned. "Ms. Chen, I wouldn't recommend that. Her fever is dangerously high. If it spikes any higher, she could have seizures. And this strain of strep, if it's not treated aggressively, it can lead to rheumatic fever, kidney complications. I'm not trying to scare you, but this isn't something to take lightly." I pressed my fingers against my temples, trying to think through the exhaustion and fear. My credit cards were maxed. My parents were gone. Mom to cancer 3 years ago, Dad to a heart attack the year before. David's family had made it clear when he left that his failures weren't their problem. I had friends, but they were all in the same boat I was, working multiple jobs just to keep their own heads above water. "Can I have a minute?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Martinez nodded, squeezing my shoulder briefly before walking away. I leaned against the wall, counting my options the way I'd counted those bills. They came up equally short. I could call my boss at the diner, but Mike had already covered for me more times than I had any right to ask. I could try to negotiate a payment plan with the hospital's billing department, but that still required some kind of down payment. I could... Excuse me. The voice was unexpected, deep, measured, with the faintest trace of an accent I couldn't immediately place. I looked up to find a man standing a respectful distance away, his presence somehow managing to command attention despite his stillness. He was Korean, I thought, though I immediately felt foolish for making assumptions based on appearance. Mid to late 30s, with the kind of face that was more striking than classically handsome, strong jawline, intelligent eyes that seemed to take in everything without effort. His clothes spoke of wealth, the kind that didn't need to announce itself. Black wool coat over a charcoal suit, the fabric catching the harsh hospital lights with a subtle sheen that came from quality, not flash. No tie, the top buttons of his white shirt undone in a way that somehow looked intentional rather than casual. "I apologize for the intrusion," he continued, his English perfect, but shaped by something else beneath it. "I couldn't help but overhear your conversation with the doctor. Your daughter is the little girl in the yellow dress." Alarm bells went off immediately. Stranger. Hospital. My child. Every maternal instinct I possessed went on high alert. "I appreciate your concern," I said carefully, "but we're fine." A slight smile touched his lips, not mocking but understanding. "Of course. I would be equally cautious in your position." He reached into his coat, and I tensed. But he only withdrew a leather wallet. "I would like to cover your daughter's treatment. All of it. No strings, no conditions. Just one parent to another." I stared at him, unable to process what he was saying. The wallet in his hand looked expensive, the leather worn in a way that suggested quality rather than age. I could see the edge of what looked like a black credit card, the kind I'd heard about, but never actually seen. "I don't understand," I said finally. "You want to pay for Lily's treatment? You don't even know us." "No," he agreed. "But I know what it's like to be powerless when someone you love is in pain. I know what it's like to count money that will never be enough." Something shifted in his expression, a shadow of old pain quickly masked. "And I'm in a position to help. So I'd like to." It was insane. People didn't just offer to pay thousands of dollars for strangers' medical bills. There had to be a catch, some hidden obligation that would reveal itself later. But even as my rational mind cataloged all the reasons to refuse, I thought of Lily's fever, of Dr. Martinez's concern about seizures and kidney damage, of the very real possibility that my pride could cost my daughter her health. "Why?" The question came out sharper than I intended. "Really? Why would you do this?" He was quiet for a moment, his gaze drifting toward the waiting room where Lily was visible through the doorway, still curled up in her chair. When he looked back at me, there was something in his eyes that seemed genuine, though guarded. "Because I can," he said simply. "Because I've stood where you're standing, making impossible calculations. Because your daughter is 6 years old and sick, and that shouldn't depend on what's in your wallet." He glanced at the wallet in his hand. "And because sometimes the universe gives us opportunities to be better than we have to be." I wanted to argue, to insist we didn't need charity, to protect whatever dignity I had left. But standing there in that hospital corridor at 1 a.m, with my daughter's fever climbing and $50 to my name, I couldn't afford pride. "If you're serious," I said slowly, "I don't know how to thank you, or how to ever repay. I'm not asking for repayment." He was already moving past me. heading toward what I assumed was the billing office. "Take care of your daughter, Ms. Chen. That's all that matters right now." "How did you—" I started to ask how he knew my name, then remembered the doctor had used it. Still, something about the way he said it, with that careful precision, made me wonder if he'd somehow known it before. I watched him disappear around a corner, my mind still trying to catch up with what had just happened. A stranger, wealthy, composed, slightly mysterious, had just offered to pay for my daughter's entire hospital stay. It should have felt like a miracle. Instead, it felt like the beginning of something I couldn't quite name. Something that settled in my stomach with the weight of inevitability. "Mommy?" Lily's voice called from the waiting room, small and scared. I hurried back to her, gathering her into my arms. "It's okay, baby. Everything's going to be okay. They're going to take care of you. Promise?" I thought about the man in the expensive coat, about the impossible offer, about all the ways the universe had taught me that nothing came without a price. But looking into my daughter's fever-bright eyes, I pushed those thoughts aside. "Promise," I said, and carried her toward the treatment area where Dr. Martinez was already waiting with a gentle smile and an IV cart. 3 hours later, Lily was sleeping peacefully in a hospital bed, the antibiotics working their way through her system, her fever already starting to break. I sat in the chair beside her, holding her small hand, unable to quite believe we were here, that she was getting the care she needed, that some stranger had made it possible. A nurse came in to check Lily's vitals, her movements quiet and efficient. "The paperwork's all been taken care of," she said softly, adjusting the IV drip. "No balance due. You're all set." "The man who paid," I asked, "did he leave a name? Or any way I could contact him to say thank you?" The nurse shook her head. "He was very clear he wanted to remain anonymous. Just said to make sure your daughter got the best care." She paused at the door. "Must be nice to have friends like that." Friends. The word felt wrong, but I didn't correct her. I didn't know what to call someone who appeared in your darkest moment and changed everything without asking for anything in return. Angel felt too optimistic. Stranger too dismissive. Savior too dramatic. I settled for mystery, and tried not to think about whether mysteries always stayed benign. Lily stirred in her sleep, her breathing easier now, her color already better. I squeezed her hand gently and allowed myself to feel grateful, even if I didn't fully understand what I was grateful for. Tomorrow I would worry about the why and the how. Tonight my daughter was safe, and that was enough. The sky outside was starting to lighten when Dr. Martinez stopped by to check on us one last time before his shift ended. "She's responding beautifully," he said, genuine pleasure in his voice. "At this rate, you'll be able to take her home this afternoon." "Thank you," I said, meaning it for more than just the medical care. He nodded, already moving toward the door, then paused. "That man who paid your bill, he asked me to tell you something," he said. "Some debts are better left unpaid. Just remember there are people who want to help." I wasn't sure what he meant, but he seemed to think you would. After he left, I sat in the quiet room, watching my daughter sleep, turning those words over in my mind. Some debts are better left unpaid. It sounded like permission to accept the gift without guilt. But the second part, just remember there are people who want to help, felt like something else. Not a warning exactly, but not entirely innocent either. A promise, maybe. Or a beginning. Friday evening found me back at Mike's Diner, my usual station by the window. The familiar choreography of taking orders and delivering plates providing a rhythm I could lose myself in. Lily was fully recovered, back at school and chattering about her hospital adventure with the resilience only children possessed. The antibiotics had worked perfectly, and Dr. Martinez's follow-up call 2 days ago had confirmed there would be no complications. I'd spent those 2 days trying to push thoughts of my mysterious benefactor to the back of my mind. Tried and failed. Between taking orders and refilling coffee cups, my thoughts kept circling back to him. The careful way he'd spoken. The expensive clothes that somehow didn't seem ostentatious. The shadow of old pain in his eyes when he'd mentioned understanding powerlessness. Who was he? Why had he been at the hospital at midnight on a Tuesday? And most troubling, would he expect something in return despite his assurances? "Earth to Maya," Carlos called from the kitchen window, sliding 2 plates of meatloaf onto the pass. "Table 6, and they're getting impatient." I grabbed the plates, forcing my attention back to work. Mike's diner wasn't fancy. Red vinyl booths, checkered floor tiles, a menu that hadn't changed since the 80s. But it was honest work with decent tips. Mike himself was a gruff teddy bear who'd given me a job when I'd been desperate and never asked questions about my personal life beyond what I volunteered. The dinner rush was in full swing, the diner humming with the usual Friday night energy. Families celebrating the end of the week, couples on budget dates, regulars who came in at the same time every Friday for the same meals. I moved through the familiar routine, my body on autopilot while my mind wandered. "Excuse me, miss?" The voice pulled me from my thoughts. I turned to find an older Korean woman standing near the hostess station, elegantly dressed in a dark blue suit, her silver hair pulled back in a neat bun. Something about her bearing suggested authority, the kind that came from years of command rather than arrogance. "Can I help you?" I asked, assuming she was waiting for a table. "I'm looking for Maya Chen," she said, her English accented but precise. I was told I might find her here. Alarm bells went off immediately. "I'm Maya. Is something wrong? Is this about Lily?" "Your daughter is fine," the woman said quickly, seeming to understand my panic. "I apologize for startling you. My name is Mrs. Park. I work for someone who asked me to deliver a message to you." I didn't need to ask who. Somehow I knew. "Perhaps we could speak privately." Mrs. Park glanced around the busy diner. "This isn't the best venue for our conversation." Mike caught my eye from behind the register, his expression questioning. I gave him a small nod. "I'm okay," and gestured toward the small break room in the back. Mrs. Park followed me, her heels clicking precisely on the tile floor. The break room was barely bigger than a closet, with a small table, 2 chairs, and a coffee maker that only worked half the time. I closed the door behind us, suddenly aware of the difference between Mrs. Park's tailored suit and my diner uniform with its faint coffee stains. "Mr. Kim would like to extend an invitation," Mrs. Park began, setting a leather portfolio on the table. "He owns several establishments in the city, restaurants, a hotel, some commercial properties. He's in need of a general manager for one of his restaurants, and he believes you would be well suited for the position." I stared at her, trying to process what I was hearing. "I'm a waitress. I have no management experience. And I don't even know this, Mr. Kim." "You met him at St. Mary's Hospital on Tuesday night," Mrs. Park said calmly. "And while it's true you haven't held a management title, Mr. Kim's research indicates you've been effectively managing operations here for the past year. Training new staff, handling inventory, resolving customer complaints, all while working double shifts as a server." "Research." The word sent a chill down my spine. "He investigated me?" "No. He ensures the people he brings into his organization are trustworthy and capable," Mrs. Park replied, as if this were the most natural thing in the world. "The position comes with a substantial salary increase, full health insurance for you and your daughter, and housing assistance if needed. The restaurant is upscale Korean fusion. You would be managing a staff of 20, overseeing daily operations, and working directly with Mr. Kim on business development." She opened the portfolio, revealing a contract with numbers that made my mouth go dry. The salary was more than triple what I made at the diner. The benefits package alone was worth thousands. "Why?" I asked, the same question I'd asked Tuesday night. "He already paid Lily's hospital bills. He doesn't owe me anything. So why this?" Mrs. Park studied me for a moment, as if deciding how much to reveal. Mr. Kim values loyalty and competence. He saw both in how you handled an impossible situation with your daughter. He's offering you an opportunity, Ms. Chen. What you do with it is your choice. I don't understand, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. People don't just offer six-figure jobs to waitresses they met once in a hospital corridor. There has to be more to this. Something that might have been approval flickered in Mrs. Park's eyes. You're right to be cautious, so let me be direct. Mr. Kim's businesses are legitimate, fully licensed, inspected, and above board. What he does in his personal life, the people he associates with, the influence he wields, that exists in a separate sphere. As his restaurant manager, you would never be asked to engage with anything illegal or questionable. Your work would be exactly what it appears, running a high-end restaurant. The careful way she phrased it told me everything she wasn't saying. Mr. Kim wasn't just a wealthy businessman. He moved in circles where lines blurred, where power had sources that didn't appear on tax returns. If I say no, I asked. Then you say no, Mrs. Park replied simply. Mr. Kim won't withdraw the hospital payment or hold this against you. The offer is genuine, not an obligation. I thought about Lily, about the cramped apartment where our bathroom ceiling leaked and the heat only worked intermittently, about the precarious balance of our life, where one unexpected expense could topple everything, about the fact that I'd been telling myself for 2 years that I was managing, when really I was just barely surviving. I need time to think about it, I said finally. Mrs. Park nodded, pulling a business card from her portfolio. Mr. Kim expected you would. Please take the weekend to consider. If you're interested, call that number Monday morning. If not, she offered a slight smile. I wish you and your daughter well. After she left, I stood in the break room for several minutes, staring at the contract and business card. The logical part of my brain screamed warnings. The exhausted, desperate part whispered about security, about health insurance, about giving Lily the kind of life she deserved. Everything okay? Mike poked his head in, his weathered face concerned. That lady looked serious. Job offer, I said, the words feeling surreal. A really good one. Mike studied me with the shrewd intelligence that lurked behind his gruff exterior. You're thinking about taking it. It wasn't a question. The money's incredible, Mike. Full benefits, housing assistance. It could change everything for Lily and me. But, he prompted, but I don't know this man, and people don't just hand out six-figure jobs without expecting something in return. I met Mike's eyes. What if I'm walking into something I can't get out of? Mike was quiet for a moment, then sighed. Maya, you're one of the smartest, hardest-working people I know. You've been busting your ass here for 2 years, taking every shift I can give you, never complaining. And you know what? You're still barely scraping by. Sometimes life offers you a door. Whether you walk through it, that's up to you. But don't let fear make you stay in a burning building just because you're scared of what's outside. His words stayed with me through the rest of my shift, through the bus ride home, through putting Lily to bed, and sitting alone in our small kitchen with Mrs. Park's business card in front of me. I thought about what the man, Mr. Kim, had said at the hospital. Sometimes the universe gives us opportunities to be better than we have to be. Was this my opportunity? Or was I about to trade one kind of struggle for another, more dangerous kind? My phone buzzed with a text from my landlord, a reminder that next month's rent would include the late fee I'd negotiated away. Another reminder that my current reality had its own dangers, its own risks. I picked up Mrs. Park's card, running my thumb over the embossed lettering. Sometimes the universe gives us opportunities. Maybe it was time to stop being afraid of them. Saturday morning, I called the number. Mrs. Park answered on the second ring. Ms. Chen, have you made a decision? I'd like to meet with Mr. Kim, I said, my voice firm despite the butterflies in my stomach. To discuss the position, ask questions, see the restaurant. Excellent. Mr. Kim will be pleased. Would tomorrow afternoon work for you? 2 o'clock? I agreed, and she gave me an address in an upscale district I'd only ever passed through on buses. After hanging up, I sat for a long moment, wondering if I'd just made the best decision of my life, or the biggest mistake. Lily wandered into the kitchen, still in her pajamas, dragging her favorite stuffed rabbit. "Mommy, are we having pancakes?" I smiled, pushing aside my uncertainty. "Absolutely. Your favorite, blueberry." As I mixed the batter, Lily chattering about her plans for the day, I made myself a promise. Whatever happened with Mr. Kim's offer, whatever world I might be stepping into, I would protect her, keep her safe, make sure she had the childhood I'd always dreamed of giving her, even if that meant making deals with mysterious benefactors and walking through doors that might not have any clear way back. The address Mrs. Park had given me led to a sleek building in the heart of the city's revitalized downtown district, all glass and steel and modern architecture. The ground floor housed the restaurant, Hanyul, the sign read in elegant script, with Korean characters beneath that I couldn't read, but which Mrs. Park had told me meant sky. I arrived 15 minutes early, dressed in the only professional outfit I owned, a simple black dress and blazer I'd bought years ago for job interviews that felt like ancient history. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see the restaurant's interior. Minimalist decor, clean lines, soft lighting that somehow managed to feel both modern and traditional. Mrs. Park met me at the door, nodding approval at my appearance. "Mr. Kim is waiting upstairs in his office. Follow me." We took a private elevator to the 3rd floor, where the corporate offices overlooked the restaurant below. Mrs. Park knocked once on a heavy wooden door, then opened it without waiting for a response. The office was larger than my entire apartment, with the same blend of modern and traditional I'd seen downstairs. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city. And behind a massive desk sat the man from the hospital, looking somehow both exactly as I remembered, and entirely different in this context. "Miss Chen," he said, rising from his chair with fluid grace. "Thank you for coming." Up close, in daylight, I could see details I'd missed in the harsh hospital fluorescence. The slight scar that ran along his jawline, the silver threads beginning to show at his temples, the intelligence in his eyes that seemed to catalog everything while revealing nothing. "Mr. Kim," I replied, accepting his extended hand. His grip was firm, warm, and brief. "Please, sit." He gestured to the leather chairs arranged near the windows. "Can I offer you something to drink? Tea? Coffee?" "I'm fine, thank you." I took the offered seat, hyper-aware of my surroundings, of him, of how carefully I needed to navigate this conversation. He sat across from me, his posture relaxed but somehow commanding attention. "I imagine you have questions." "Several," I admitted, starting with, "Why me? You paid my daughter's hospital bills, which I'm incredibly grateful for. But offering me a job, that's something else entirely. And I need to understand why before I can even consider it." A slight smile touched his lips, as if he'd expected this directness. "Fair enough. The honest answer? When I saw you at the hospital, I saw someone dealing with an impossible situation with grace and intelligence. You didn't fall apart. You didn't make demands or create drama. You simply tried to figure out how to solve an unsolvable problem." He leaned forward slightly. "That's the kind of person I want running my establishments. Someone who stays calm under pressure. Who puts others, in your case your daughter, before themselves. Who does what needs to be done." "But you don't know me," I protested. "One interaction in a hospital isn't enough to judge someone's character or capabilities." "Which is why I had you investigated," he said calmly, as if this were perfectly reasonable. "Your work history, your financial records, your personal life. Mrs. Park was correct. You've been essentially managing Mike's diner for the past year while being paid as a server. You've never stolen, never lied to your employers, never missed a shift unless absolutely necessary. You're raising a daughter alone with minimal support and doing a remarkable job of it. His eyes met mine directly. I know enough, Ms. Chen. The invasion of privacy should have outraged me. Instead, I found myself appreciating the straightforwardness. At least he wasn't pretending this was anything other than what it was, a calculated business decision. Mrs. Park mentioned your personal life operates in a separate sphere, I said carefully. I need you to be specific about what that means. What kind of man are you, Mr. Kim? Something shifted in his expression. Not quite surprise, but close, as if he hadn't expected me to ask so directly. I'm a businessman, Ms. Chen. I own restaurants, commercial properties, some import-export operations. All legitimate, all legal. He paused, choosing his words carefully. I also move in circles where traditional business relationships intersect with more. Traditional structures of community leadership. In Korean culture, particularly among older immigrant communities, there are hierarchies and loyalties that exist outside official channels. I respect those structures. Sometimes I facilitate them. But I don't ask my employees to engage with any of that. It was the most carefully worded explanation of organized crime influence I'd ever heard. Traditional structures, community leadership, facilitate. All code words for power that didn't appear on any org chart. And if those worlds collide? I asked. If working for you puts my daughter in danger? His expression hardened, the first genuine emotion I'd seen from him. I would never allow that. Your daughter's safety, your safety would be my personal responsibility. Anyone who threatened you would be threatening me directly, and I don't tolerate threats, Ms. Chen. The way he said it, with absolute certainty and a cold undercurrent of promise, should have terrified me. Instead, I felt something unexpected. Relief. Because whatever else Mr. Kim might be, I believed he meant what he said about protection. If I accept, I said slowly, I need clear boundaries. I manage the restaurant. I stay completely separate from whatever else you're involved in. And the moment I feel uncomfortable or unsafe, I can walk away. No retaliation, no punishment. Agreed, he said immediately, with one addition. If you decide to leave, you give me 2 weeks' notice so I can find and train a replacement. Professional courtesy, nothing more. I studied him, trying to see past the careful mask to whatever lay beneath. Why do I get the feeling there's more to this offer than just needing a restaurant manager? That slight smile again, as if he appreciated the question. Because you're perceptive. The truth is, Ms. Chen, I could hire any number of experienced restaurant managers. What I can't easily find is someone with your particular combination of intelligence, integrity, and... He paused. Circumstantial vulnerability that creates loyalty. You want me to be grateful, I said flatly. Obligated. I want you to be motivated, he corrected. To see this as the opportunity it is and to value it accordingly. But I also want you to choose freely. A forced employee is a resentful employee, and resentment breeds betrayal. He stood, moving to the windows that overlooked the city. I'm offering you a way out of struggling, Ms. Chen. A way to give your daughter stability and security. What I'm asking in return is competence, loyalty, and discretion. Nothing more. I thought about Lily, about the apartment we'd hopefully leave behind, about health insurance that would cover not just emergencies but preventive care, dental, vision, about a salary that would let me save for her future instead of scrambling to cover the present. I'd like to see the restaurant, I said. Meet the current staff. Understand what I'd be walking into operationally. Of course. He pressed a button on his desk. Mrs. Park will give you a complete tour. Take all the time you need. Ask whatever questions you want. And then, He extended his hand again. Decide if this is the door you want to walk through. As I shook his hand, I had the strangest sensation of standing at a crossroads, with no way to see what waited down either path, but Mike's words echoed in my mind. Don't let fear make you stay in a burning building just because you're scared of what's outside. Maybe it was time to stop being afraid and start building something better. Even if the man offering me the tools came with shadows I couldn't quite see. The restaurant's kitchen gleamed under industrial lighting, stainless steel surfaces reflecting my own uncertain expression back at me. Mrs. Park had been thorough in her tour, introducing me to each staff member with a precision that suggested she'd memorized not just their names, but their entire histories. Head chef, sous chefs, line cooks, servers, host staff, 20 people whose livelihoods would suddenly become my responsibility. The previous manager left rather abruptly, Mrs. Park explained as we stood in the main dining room after hours, the space empty and somehow more intimidating in its silence. Personal reasons. Mr. Kim needs someone who can step in immediately and maintain the standard of excellence Hanul is known for. I ran my fingers along the smooth surface of one of the tables, the wood expensive and carefully maintained. Everything here spoke of quality, of attention to detail, of expectations I wasn't sure I could meet. When would I start? Tomorrow, if you accept. Mr. Kim believes in immediate immersion. Mrs. Park's expression softened almost imperceptibly. You'll have support. Ms. Chen. I'll be available for questions, and Mr. Kim himself will meet with you weekly to review operations. You won't be alone in this. That night, after putting Lily to bed in our cramped apartment, I sat at our small kitchen table with the contract spread before me. The numbers still seemed impossible. The benefits still seemed too good to be true. But I thought about Dr. Martinez's grave expression when he'd talked about Lily's fever, about the fear that had gripped me when I'd counted those $52, about every moment of the past 2 years when I'd felt like I was drowning while trying to convince everyone, including myself, that I was swimming. I signed the contract at midnight, my hand shaking slightly as I wrote my name. The next morning, I gave Mike my 2 weeks' notice. His expression was sad but unsurprised, and he pulled me into a brief hug that smelled of coffee and bacon grease. "You're doing the right thing, kid," he said gruffly. "But if it doesn't work out—" "I know," I interrupted. "Thank you, Mike, for everything." My first day at Hanul was a controlled chaos of information and introduction. The staff was professional but wary, clearly uncertain about their new manager who'd appeared out of nowhere with no restaurant management experience on her resume. I didn't blame them. I'd be suspicious too. Chef Min, the head chef, was particularly skeptical. He was in his 50s, a master of Korean fusion cuisine who'd been with Mr. Kim since Hanul opened 3 years ago. During our first meeting, he crossed his arms and studied me with unconcealed doubt. "You've worked in restaurants before?" he asked in accented English. "As a server, yes, for the past 2 years. And now you manage?" The skepticism was thick enough to cut. I met his gaze steadily. "Mr. Kim believes I can do this job. So did Mrs. Park when she offered me the position. I'm here to learn, Chef Min, and to help this restaurant succeed. If you have concerns about my abilities, I'd rather hear them now so we can address them." Something shifted in his expression. Not quite approval, but perhaps a grudging respect for directness. "We'll see," he said finally. "Kitchen runs smooth now. Don't break what works." I don't intend to. The first month was brutal. I arrived before dawn and left long after the last customers departed, learning systems and procedures, memorizing suppliers and schedules, understanding the delicate balance between front-of-house elegance and back-of-house efficiency. I made mistakes, ordered too much of one ingredient, not enough of another, misread a reservation and nearly caused a scene with a regular customer. But I learned quickly, and the staff gradually warmed to me as they realized I wasn't there to impose random changes or throw my weight around. Lily adapted to our new routine with the resilience of childhood. Mrs. Park had arranged for a reliable after-school program at a good school, and the apartment Mr. Kim's company provided was in a safe neighborhood with a small park nearby. For the first time in 2 years, I wasn't constantly worried about making rent or whether we'd have heat in winter. Mr. Kim himself was a presence that felt both distant and immediate. He appeared at the restaurant irregularly. Sometimes I wouldn't see him for days. Then he'd arrive without warning to observe service or review the books. His feedback was always precise, never cruel, delivered with the kind of directness that I'd come to recognize as his default mode. "The wait times are improving," he noted during one of our weekly meetings, his eyes scanning the performance reports I'd prepared. "But table turnover in the east section is still below optimal. What's your assessment?" "Server issue," I replied, having anticipated this question. "Jennifer is excellent with customers but slow with processing. I'm pairing her with Marcus for training. He's efficient but sometimes brusque. They balance each other." A slight nod, his version of approval. "Good. And the produce supplier issue?" "Resolved. I found an alternative who can provide the same quality at 15% lower cost." Chef Min approved the samples. These meetings became the rhythm of my new life. Mr. Kim was demanding but fair, expecting excellence but providing resources to achieve it. And slowly I realized I was good at this job. Better than good. The skills I'd developed managing household finances on impossible budgets translated perfectly to restaurant operations. The emotional intelligence I'd honed dealing with difficult customers at the diner served me well in managing staff dynamics. 3 months in, during one of our meetings, Mr. Kim did something unexpected. He smiled, genuine, reaching his eyes, transforming his usually austere expression into something warmer. "You've exceeded my expectations, Ms. Chen," he said. "The staff respects you. The kitchen runs smoothly. Customer satisfaction scores are the highest they've been in a year. I made the right choice." The compliment caught me off guard, pleasure warming my chest in a way that felt dangerous. "Thank you. I'm grateful for the opportunity." "Maya," he said, using my first name for the first time since the hospital. "I think we can dispense with excessive formality. You've proven yourself. You're not just an employee. You're a valued part of this operation." The shift was subtle, but significant. After that meeting, something changed between us. He began staying later after our meetings, our conversations drifting from pure business to more personal topics. He asked about Lily, genuinely interested in her progress in school, her adjustment to the neighborhood. I found myself asking about his own life, though his answers remained carefully vague, enough to seem open without revealing anything substantial. "Do you have children?" I asked once, during a rare quiet moment when we were both reviewing inventory lists in his office. Something flickered across his face, too quick to identify. "No, my life hasn't been conducive to family." He glanced up from the papers. "But I understand their importance. Your dedication to your daughter is admirable." "She's everything," I said simply. "Everything I do is for her." "I know." His voice held an odd note, something almost wistful. "That kind of love is rare. Precious." By the 4th month, I'd established myself enough that the staff came to me first with issues, rather than trying to navigate around me. Chef Min and I had developed a respectful working relationship, occasionally even joking during the pre-service rush. The restaurant was thriving, and I'd managed to implement several small changes that improved both efficiency and atmosphere. It was during this period that I first noticed Mr. Kim's other world bleeding into mine. Small things at first. The way certain customers would arrive without reservations, but be immediately seated at the best tables. The respectful way everyone, even Chef Min, who respected no one, treated these particular guests. The brief, intense conversations I'd catch Mr. Kim having in Korean with men who wore expensive suits and watchful expressions. I didn't ask questions. That was part of our unspoken agreement. But I wasn't naive anymore. I understood that the restaurant, successful as it was, served purposes beyond profit. It was a place where certain people could meet, where conversations could happen in public yet privately, where alliances were maintained and respect was demonstrated. 5 months in, everything changed. It was a Tuesday evening, unseasonably cold for October. Service was winding down, only a few tables still occupied, when Lily's school called. She'd been in an accident on the playground, nothing serious, but they'd called an ambulance as a precaution. And could I meet them at the hospital? The fear that gripped me was immediate and visceral, an echo of that night 6 months ago when this had all started. I grabbed my coat, barking rapid instructions to the assistant manager, already moving toward the door when a hand caught my arm. Mr. Kim. I hadn't even noticed him arrive. What happened? Lily, school called, playground accident, I'll drive you. Not a suggestion. He was already guiding me toward the back exit where his car waited, the same black sedan I'd occasionally seen him arrive in. You don't need to, I started. I'm driving you, he repeated, his tone brooking no argument. Something in his voice, in the firm way his hand remained on my arm, made me realize this wasn't about convenience or courtesy. This was about something else, something I didn't have time to analyze. The drive to the hospital was silent, my hands clenched in my lap as worst-case scenarios played through my mind. Mr. Kim's presence was oddly steadying, solid, certain, a calm in the storm of my panic. When we arrived, he was out of the car before I was, his hand at the small of my back as we hurried inside. The emergency room receptionist took one look at Mr. Kim and immediately began making calls, her demeanor shifting from bureaucratic indifference to deferential efficiency. Within minutes, we were being escorted to where Lily waited, her arm in a temporary splint, but otherwise alert and already bored with the whole situation. Mommy. She brightened when she saw me. I fell off the monkey bars, but I was really brave. The paramedic said so. Relief flooded through me so intensely my knees weakened. I gathered her into my arms, careful of the injured arm, breathing in the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo. You scared me, baby. I'm okay, she assured me with 6-year-old certainty. It doesn't even hurt that much. They gave me really good ice cream. The doctor confirmed it was a simple fracture, easily treated, would heal completely in 6 weeks. As he explained the care instructions, I felt Mr. Kim's presence behind me, steady and quiet. When the doctor mentioned costs, Mr. Kim stepped forward smoothly. Bill my account, he said, producing a card. The same one from 6 months ago. Ms. Chen is covered under our company insurance. The doctor nodded without question, and I realized this had been arranged, that Mr. Kim had somehow ensured my daughter's medical care would always be taken care of, extending protection beyond what the basic benefits package included. After the doctor left, after Lily had been fitted with a proper cast and given a lollipop, I turned to find Mr. Kim waiting by the door, his expression difficult to read. Thank you, I said, the words inadequate for everything I was feeling. For driving me, for staying, for... I gestured vaguely at the hospital around us. All of it. She's important to you, he said simply. That makes her important to me. Something in the way he said it made my breath catch. This wasn't just employer concern for employee morale. This was something else. Something personal that I hadn't expected and wasn't sure how to handle. Lily appeared at my side, clutching her new cast proudly. Mommy, who's this? Is he your friend? Mr. Kim crouched down to Lily's level, his usually austere expression softening. My name is Jinwoo. I work with your mother. How are you feeling? I'm okay. Look at my cast. Everyone at school is going to sign it. She held up her arm for inspection. Are you Korean? We learned about Korea in school. Did you know they invented metal printing before anyone else? A genuine smile crossed Jinwoo's face, something I'd never seen from him before. I did know that. You're a smart girl. Mommy says I'm smart like her. Lily leaned closer conspiratorially. Are you going to come to dinner? Mommy makes really good Korean food. She learned special for the restaurant. Heat flooded my cheeks. Lily, I'm sure Mr. Kim. Jinwoo, he corrected gently, still focused on Lily. And I would love to come to dinner sometime if your mother invites me. The drive back to our apartment, Jinwoo insisting despite my protests, was quiet. Lily dozing in the back seat, exhausted from her ordeal and the pain medication. I watched the city lights blur past the window, acutely aware of Jinwoo beside me, of how this evening had shifted something between us that I couldn't quite name. You didn't have to do all this, I said softly, not wanting to wake Lily. The insurance coverage, staying at the hospital, driving us home. I know. He didn't take his eyes from the road. But I wanted to. Why? The question I kept asking him, the one that never seemed to have a complete answer. He was quiet for so long I thought he might not respond. When he did, his voice was low, careful. Because 6 months ago you were alone with a sick child and $50. Because you've built something remarkable at the restaurant. Because... He paused, seeming to choose his words with unusual care, because somewhere along the way you and Lily stopped being just an employee and her child. You became people I care about protecting. The admission hung in the air between us, weighted with implications I wasn't ready to examine. When we reached my building, he helped me get Lily upstairs. His presence in our small apartment both natural and surreal. This powerful man, this mysterious figure who commanded respect and possibly fear, gently laying my daughter on her bed and making sure she was comfortable before stepping back. Thank you, I said again, walking him to the door. For everything tonight. He paused in the doorway, and for a moment, something vulnerable flashed across his face. Maya, if anything like this happens again, anything at all, you call me first. Promise me. Jinwoo, I can't ask you to. Promise me. His voice was firm, but his eyes held something almost pleading. I promise, I said softly, and meant it. After he left, I stood in my small kitchen, thinking about the past 6 months. About how a random encounter in a hospital had led to this. A new job, a new life, and somehow, impossibly, a connection with a man I still didn't fully understand, but couldn't deny I trusted. That night, as I checked on Lily one last time before bed, I found myself thinking about Jinwoo's expression when he'd looked at her, when he'd crouched down to speak to her at her level. Something gentle. Something that didn't fit with the image of a man who moved in shadows and commanded unquestioning respect. Maybe, I thought as I drifted toward sleep, people were more complicated than the labels we gave them. Maybe mysterious benefactors could become friends. Maybe powerful men with dangerous connections could still choose kindness. Maybe, after 2 years of just surviving, I was finally starting to live again, and maybe that was worth whatever risks came with it. 6 months into my position at Hanel, I'd stopped thinking of Jinwoo as Mr. Kim. The transition had been gradual, natural, marked by small moments that accumulated into something larger than professional courtesy. He'd become a constant in our lives, not overwhelming, never intrusive, but present in ways that mattered. After Lily's playground accident, something shifted in our dynamic. Jinwoo began stopping by the restaurant more frequently, often arriving near closing when the dinner rush had ended, and I was reviewing the night's receipts. These visits had a different quality than our formal weekly meetings. He'd pour himself a drink from the bar, always whiskey, neat, and we'd talk about everything and nothing. The restaurant's performance, yes, but also books we'd read, places we'd traveled or wanted to, the small moments that made up a life. "How's Lily's arm healing?" he asked one evening in late November, settling into the chair across from my desk in the small office I'd claimed as my own. "Clean break, healing perfectly. She's already planning what color cast she wants next if she ever breaks another bone." I smiled, setting aside the supplier invoice I'd been reviewing. "She's remarkably unbothered by the whole thing. Asked me yesterday if she could take gymnastics." Smart and fearless, Jinwoo's expression held genuine warmth. "She gets that from you." The compliment made something flutter in my chest that I'd been trying to ignore for weeks now. "I'm not fearless. I'm terrified most of the time. But you don't let it stop you. That's the definition of courage." He sipped his whiskey, regarding me thoughtfully. "You should bring her by sometime during the day, when the restaurant's closed. Let her see where you work, what you've built here." "She'd love that," I admitted. "She's been asking to see the restaurant, keeps telling her friends her mom manages a fancy Korean sky place." "This Saturday, then. Bring her for lunch. Chef Min can prepare some of our more child-friendly dishes." It had become like this between us, plans that extended beyond the professional, conversations that lingered on personal territory. I should have been more cautious, should have maintained clearer boundaries. But the truth was, I'd been alone for so long that Jinwoo's attention felt like sunlight after a long winter. Saturday arrived with unseasonably warm weather for late November. Lily was beside herself with excitement, insisting on wearing her fancy dress. A simple blue thing with white flowers that she'd outgrown slightly but refused to replace. I dressed carefully too, though I told myself it was just about making a good impression, not about the way Jinwoo's eyes sometimes lingered on me when he thought I wasn't looking. Hanul was beautiful in the daytime, sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows, making the minimalist decor seem warm rather than austere. Jinwoo met us at the entrance, dressed casually in dark jeans and a black sweater that somehow looked as expensive as his usual suits. "Lily," he greeted her with a slight bow that delighted her. "Welcome to Hanul, your mother's restaurant." "It's your restaurant," Lily corrected with 6-year-old literalness. "Mommy just works here." "Mommy makes it run," Jinwoo replied, his eyes meeting mine with something I couldn't quite name. "That's what makes it hers too." Chef Min had outdone himself, preparing a feast that walked the line between authentically Korean and appealingly accessible for a child's palate. Lily tried everything with adventurous enthusiasm, peppering Jinwoo with questions between bites. "Do you live in Korea? Have you been to the mountains? Mommy showed me pictures of the cherry blossoms. Do you have kids? Why not? Don't you want them?" "Lily," I interjected, embarrassed by her directness. "Not everyone wants children. It's personal." "It's all right," Jinwoo said, his attention fully on Lily. "I never thought I'd have time for children. My work is very demanding, but—" He glanced at me briefly. "I'm learning that maybe I was wrong about what I have time for." The statement hung in the air, weighted with meaning that went over Lily's head, but landed squarely in my chest. After lunch, Jinwoo gave Lily a complete tour of the restaurant, explaining everything with patience that surprised me. He showed her the kitchen, where Chef Min let her test a dessert. He demonstrated how the reservation system worked, letting her book a table under her name. He even took her up to his office, where she sat in his chair and pretended to be a very important businesswoman. Watching them together, I felt something shift inside me. Jinwoo wasn't just being polite or accommodating his employee's child. He was genuinely engaged, genuinely enjoying Lily's company. And she, for her part, had taken to him with the kind of instant trust children sometimes show for the right adults. "I like him, Mommy," Lily announced on the drive home, her voice drowsy with contentment. "Can he come to dinner at our place next time?" "We'll see, baby." "That means yes," Lily said with satisfaction, and promptly fell asleep. But she was right. The following week, Jinwoo did come to dinner at our apartment. I'd agonized over what to make, finally settling on bulgogi and all the banchan I'd learned to prepare perfectly after months at the restaurant. Our small dining table felt crowded with 3 of us, but somehow that made it cozier rather than cramped. Jinwoo brought gifts, a beautiful children's book about Korean folktales for Lily, and for me, a bottle of wine that I knew cost more than a week's groceries. He seemed different in our space, less guarded, the austere businessman facade softening into something more human. "This is excellent," he said after his first bite, genuine surprise in his voice. "You've been practicing." "I wanted to understand the cuisine I was helping serve," I admitted. "Started teaching myself. But..." I hesitated, then decided to be honest. "I found I enjoyed it. Connecting to that part of your culture." Something flickered in his eyes, pleasure mixed with something deeper. "Most people don't take that kind of initiative. You continue to surprise me, Maya." The way he said my name, with that slight accent shaping the vowels differently, sent warmth through me that I couldn't pretend was just gratitude or professional pride. After dinner, while Lily watched a movie in the living room, Jinwoo helped me clean up in the kitchen, insisting despite my protests that he was a guest. We worked in comfortable silence, falling into an easy rhythm that felt practiced despite being new. "I need to tell you something," he said as I handed him a dish to dry. "About the restaurant. About me." My hands stilled in the soapy water. "Okay. There are people who don't appreciate my success, rivals who see Hanol and my other businesses as threats." His voice was carefully neutral, but I heard the weight beneath the words. "I've made sure you and Lily are protected. Additional security measures you're not aware of. Contingency plans. But I wanted you to know that there are risks associated with me, with being in my orbit." I turned to face him fully, studying his expression. "You're telling me we might be in danger because of you." "I'm telling you that I've ensured you won't be," he corrected. "But I want you to understand what that means. The protection is real, but so is the reason it's necessary." I should have been angry, should have demanded to know why he'd put us in this position without clearer warning. But looking at his face, at the tension in his jaw, and the genuine concern in his eyes, I understood that this was his way of being honest, of giving me information I deserved to have. "Who are these rivals?" I asked. "Other organizations, people who came from Korea and built power bases here, like I did, but through different methods. Some are more traditional, more violent. They see me as too modern, too willing to work within American systems rather than against them." He set down the dish towel. "Most importantly, they see people I care about as potential leverage. And we're people you care about. Not a question." "Yes." The simple affirmation carried more weight than a lengthy explanation. "Which is why I need you to promise me something. If anything unusual happens, anything that makes you uncomfortable, anyone approaching you or Lily who seems even slightly suspicious, you tell me immediately. And you follow the security protocols Mrs. Park will review with you." "Security protocols," I repeated, the reality of what he was describing settling over me. "Jinwoo, what exactly are we talking about here?" He moved closer, his presence somehow both comforting and unsettling. "Probably nothing. The measures are preventative, but I won't risk you or Lily. I can't." The intensity in his voice made my breath catch. This wasn't just about protecting an employee. This was personal, visceral, the kind of fierce protectiveness I recognized because I felt it every day for Lily. "Okay," I said softly. "I'll follow the protocols. I'll tell you if anything concerns me. But Jinwoo..." I placed my hand on his arm, feeling the tension in his muscles. "You need to promise me something too. If this protection you're offering comes at a cost I can't pay, if staying in your world puts Lily in more danger than leaving it would, you'll let us go, no matter how you feel about it." Something painful flashed across his face. "If that becomes necessary, I'll make sure you're safe and settled somewhere far from here. You have my word." We stood there in my small kitchen, the sounds of Lily's movie drifting in from the other room, the weight of unspoken things settling between us. Then Jin-woo did something unexpected. He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear, his touch gentle and brief, but electric. "I should go," he said quietly. "But thank you for tonight. For—" he glanced toward the living room where Lily was. "For letting me be part of this, even briefly." After he left, I stood alone in my kitchen, my hand touching the place where his fingers had been, trying to understand what was happening between us. Professional boundaries had blurred weeks ago, but this was something else, something that felt inevitable and terrifying in equal measure. That night, tucking Lily into bed, she looked up at me with sleepy eyes. "Mommy? Is Jin-woo going to be my daddy?" The question hit me like a physical blow. "What? Baby, no. He's my boss, a friend, but he looks at you the way Prince Philip looks at Aurora," she insisted with the strange wisdom children sometimes possess. "And he looks at me like he wants to keep us." I didn't know how to respond to that, so I just kissed her forehead and told her to sleep. But her words echoed in my mind long after her breathing deepened into sleep. The following weeks, Jin-woo's warning proved prescient. Mrs. Park conducted a security briefing that was both thorough and alarming. New locks on my apartment, a panic button disguised as a key fob, specific instructions about varying my routes home, about what to do if anyone approached us, about emergency numbers that would be answered 24/7. "Is this really necessary?" I asked Mrs. Park during the briefing. "Mr. Kim believes in being prepared," she replied diplomatically. "And in his world, preparation prevents problems." But despite the increased security awareness, life continued with strange normality. I managed the restaurant. Lily thrived in school. Jin-woo remained a constant presence, increasingly personal despite the professional framework we maintained in public. By December, he'd started joining us for dinner once a week, usually bringing groceries so I wouldn't have to cook alone after a long shift. He and Lily developed their own relationship. He taught her simple Korean phrases. She taught him the plot of every movie she watched. Sometimes I'd find them reading together, her small head tucked against his shoulder, and something in my chest would ache with hope and fear. "This is dangerous," I told him one evening after Lily had gone to bed, the two of us lingering over tea at my small kitchen table. "What we're doing, getting close like this." "I know," he admitted, "but I can't seem to stop." "Neither can I," I whispered, "and that terrifies me." He reached across the table, his hand covering mine. "I never expected this, Maya. Never expected you. But now that I have you both in my life," his grip tightened, "I can't imagine letting go. Even though it puts us in danger? The danger exists whether we're close or not. You worked for me. That created the connection. The only difference now is that I'm even more motivated to keep you safe." It was circular logic, but I found I didn't care. Because the truth was, I didn't want to let go either. Somewhere between that first night at the hospital and now, Jin-woo had become essential to our lives, not just as benefactor or employer, but as something deeper, something I was finally ready to name. On Christmas Eve, Jin-woo arrived with gifts. Too many, too expensive, but chosen with such care that I couldn't bring myself to refuse them. A bicycle for Lily with training wheels, and a helmet decorated with butterflies. Books I'd mentioned wanting to read. A delicate necklace that he fastened around my neck with hands that trembled slightly. "It's too much," I protested weakly. "It's not nearly enough," he replied, his fingers lingering at my nape. "Not for what you've given me." "What have I given you?" I asked, genuinely confused. He stepped back, his expression more open than I'd ever seen it. A reason to be better. A place that feels like home. The possibility of something I'd convinced myself I could never have. Before I could respond, Lily called from the living room, wanting Jinwoo to help her assemble the bicycle. I watched them together, his patient instructions and her delighted laughter, and felt the final walls around my heart crumble. I was falling for Jinwoo Kim, had probably been falling for months, and despite the danger, despite the complications, despite everything that made this impossible, I couldn't bring myself to fight it anymore. That night, after Lily fell asleep surrounded by wrapping paper and new toys, Jinwoo and I sat together on my worn couch, the Christmas tree lights casting soft shadows across his face. "Stay," I said softly. I don't mean, just stay. Tonight. Be here when she wakes up tomorrow. Let this be real for one day. He studied me for a long moment, something vulnerable and hopeful in his eyes. "Are you sure?" I wasn't sure of anything except that I was tired of being alone, tired of fighting what I felt, tired of pretending this was anything other than what it was. "Stay," I repeated, and when he pulled me against his side, his arm around my shoulders, I finally let myself relax into the possibility of something new, something that felt dangerously close to family. January brought unseasonably cold weather, and the first real test of Jinwoo's promised protection. It started small, so small I almost didn't notice. A car that seemed to follow the same route I took home from work 3 nights in a row. A man in the coffee shop near Lily's school who watched us with too much interest. Nothing overt, nothing I could point to as definite threat, but enough to trigger the awareness Mrs. Park's security briefing had instilled. I called Jinwoo immediately, as he'd made me promise. He arrived at my apartment within 20 minutes, accompanied by 2 men I'd seen occasionally at the restaurant. Part of his security detail, though I'd always been careful not to ask too many questions about their specific roles. His expression was calm, but his eyes were sharp, assessing, already shifting into the version of himself I rarely saw, the one who commanded through quiet authority and unstated threat. "Tell me everything," he said, settling at my kitchen table, while his men did a sweep of the apartment that I found both reassuring and unsettling. I detailed what I'd noticed, feeling foolish as I described things that seemed innocuous in retrospect. Maybe I'm being paranoid. Mrs. Park's briefing probably just made me hyper-aware. "You're not paranoid," Jinwoo interrupted. "Your instincts are correct. There's been movement from a rival organization. Nothing directed at you yet, but enough that I've had my people monitoring potential threats." The casual way he discussed rival organizations and monitoring threats reminded me sharply of the world he inhabited beyond the restaurant, beyond our dinners and Lily's bedtime stories. "What kind of movement?" I asked, my hand unconsciously moving to my phone, ready to call the school, to grab Lily and run. "They're testing boundaries, seeing how I react to pressure." His jaw tightened. "They know about you and Lily, know you're important to me, and they're deciding whether that makes you useful leverage or just interesting information." The clinical way he described us being evaluated as potential hostages made my stomach turn. "Jinwoo, it won't come to that," he said firmly. "I'm telling you this because you deserve to know, not because I'm worried. They're testing Maya. I'm responding. By the end of the week, they'll understand that approaching you or Lily would be..." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Catastrophically unwise for them." I wanted to ask what he meant by that, what exactly he planned to do, but part of me knew I didn't want those details, didn't want to know specifically what violence might be deployed on our behalf. One of Jinwoo's men returned from checking the apartment, speaking rapidly in Korean. Jinwoo's expression darkened, then smoothed over. He responded in the same language, his tone brooking no argument, then turned back to me. "I'm increasing your security. Someone will be with you at all times. Obviously, respectfully, but present. Another person stationed near Lily's school. The apartment building's entrance will be monitored. This is temporary, just until the situation resolves. How long is temporary? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. A week, maybe 2. He reached across the table, taking my hand. I know this is frightening. I'm sorry you're experiencing this because of me. Don't apologize for protecting us, I said quietly. But Jinwoo, if this is what being in your life means, constant threats, constant fear, maybe we need to reconsider. Pain flashed across his face, quickly masked. If that's what you want. I didn't say it's what I want, I interrupted. I said maybe we need to consider it, for Lily's sake, for all our sakes. We sat in heavy silence, the weight of impossible choices settling between us. Finally, Jinwoo spoke, his voice low and intense. Give me 2 weeks. Let me handle this. If at the end of that time you still want to walk away. His hand tightened on mine. I'll help you relocate. Set you up somewhere safe, far from here, with enough resources that you'll never struggle again. I won't like it, but I'll do it. Because your safety, Lily's safety, that matters more than what I want. The offer was genuine. I could hear it in his voice. He would let us go if I asked, would provide for us even as he released us. And that selflessness, that willingness to prioritize our well-being over his desires, made my decision easier than it should have been. 2 weeks, I agreed. But Jinwoo, you have to promise me something. Whatever you do to resolve this, whatever methods you use, I don't want to know the details. I can't know. Understanding flickered in his eyes. You want plausible deniability. I want to be able to look at you and see the man who reads bedtime stories to my daughter, not, I struggled for words, not whatever else you are when you're not with us. That's fair, he said quietly. And Maya, that man, the one who reads her bedtime stories, he's real, just as real as the other parts of me. Maybe more real, because you and Lily bring him out. The following days were strange, living under obvious protection. A man named Daejung became my shadow. Polite, professional, always 10 feet away but close enough to intervene if needed. Another guard, Soon-ho, was stationed near Lily's school, watching without interacting. The building entrance was monitored by rotating security that the other residents seemed not to notice, or were too intimidated to question. Lily, resilient as always, adapted quickly. Is Daejung our bodyguard like in the movies? She asked one morning as we walked to school, the man trailing at his respectful distance. Something like that, I admitted. Jinwoo wants to make sure we're safe. Because of his work, Lily said with 6-year-old comprehension. Because some people don't like him. It disturbed me how easily she accepted this reality, but I suppose children adapted to what adults normalized. Just for a little while, baby. Until everything settles down. At the restaurant, business continued as usual, though I noticed increased security there too. More of Jinwoo's men present, watching everyone who entered with careful attention. Chef Min seemed unsurprised by the changes, which told me more about his awareness of Jinwoo's world than I'd previously understood. You're good for him, Chef Min said unexpectedly one evening as we reviewed the next week's menu. Make him remember there's more than just business. I don't know what you mean, I replied carefully. Yes, you do. Chef Min's expression was serious. In our world, Jinwoo's world, people forget how to be human. Forget there's life beyond power and territory. You remind him. You and your daughter. He paused. That makes you valuable, but also vulnerable. Be careful, Maya. The warning echoed others I'd received, each person who knew Jinwoo's true nature offering similar advice. Be careful. Watch yourself. Understand what you're involved with. But I was past the point of careful. Past the point where I could extract myself without damage. Lily had already started calling Jinwoo by name, already expected to see him multiple times per week, already trusted him with a child's wholehearted faith. And I'd fallen in love with him somewhere between hospital corridors and Christmas Eve, between business meetings and bedtime stories. 8 days after Jinwoo's warning, something changed. I felt it in the atmosphere at the restaurant, in the way his security detail moved with increased alertness, in the brief, tense conversations Jinwoo conducted in Korean before disappearing for hours at a time. He came to my apartment on the 9th day, arriving after midnight when Lily was long asleep. I'd been reviewing accounts on my laptop, unable to sleep, and answered his knock immediately. "It's done," he said without preamble, his expression exhausted but satisfied. "The threat's been neutralized. You and Lily are safe." Relief flooded through me so intensely I felt my knees weaken. "What happened?" "You said you didn't want details," he reminded me gently. "I don't, but I need—" I struggled for what I needed, finally settling on. "I need to know you're okay. That resolving this didn't cost you something terrible." He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "It cost me nothing I wasn't willing to pay. The rival organization understands now that you and Lily are untouchable, that any move against you would be met with—" He paused. "With overwhelming response. They've agreed to maintain boundaries. How do you know they'll keep that agreement?" "Because I demonstrated what happens when boundaries are crossed." His voice was flat, matter-of-fact, describing violence without describing it. I should have been horrified, should have recoiled from the implications of what he'd done, what he'd ordered done on our behalf. Instead, I felt something primal and raw. Gratitude that he'd protected us. Relief that Lily could return to normal life. And underneath it all, a possessive satisfaction that this powerful, dangerous man had wielded his power to keep us safe. "Thank you," I whispered, moving closer to him. "For protecting us. For keeping your promise." "Always," he replied, his hands coming to rest on my waist. "Maya, I need you to understand something. This won't be the last threat. Being with me means living with the possibility of danger. I can minimize it, manage it, respond to it, but I can't eliminate it entirely. Not while I am who I am, do what I do." "Then change," I said impulsively. "Walk away from that world. You have legitimate businesses, resources, connections. You could build something new, something safer. It's not that simple." "Why not?" I challenged. "What's keeping you in that life besides habit and obligation? You're not happy there. Jinwoo, I see it in your eyes sometimes. The weariness. The weight of it all." He was quiet for a long moment, his hand still on my waist, his gaze searching my face. "If I walk away, I lose protection. Lose the ability to shield you from threats. The power I have is what keeps you safe. Or maybe the power you have is what makes us targets in the first place," I countered. "Maybe if you weren't in that world, we wouldn't need protection from it." "Maybe," he conceded. "But the transition, extracting myself from current obligations, ensuring no power vacuum that makes us vulnerable, it would take time. Years, perhaps." "Then start," I said simply. "Start now. Build an exit strategy. Because Jinwoo, if you want a future with us, really want it, not just stolen moments between crises, you have to choose it. Choose us over that world." Something shifted in his expression, hope warring with ingrained caution. "You'd wait?" While I arranged everything, put protections in place, slowly extracted myself. "If you're serious about it, yes." I moved even closer, until I could feel his heartbeat against my chest. But you have to mean it. Have to really commit to building something different. Because I can't raise Lily in constant fear. Won't let her grow up thinking this level of danger is normal. I understand. His arms fully encircled me now, holding me against him. And Maya, I do mean it. I have for weeks. I just didn't know how to say it. How to admit that what I want more than power, more than territory, more than everything I've built, is this. You and Lily. A life that's not just survival and strategy. I tilted my head up, meeting his eyes in the dim light of my apartment. Then let's build it. Slowly, carefully, but really build it. He kissed me then, the first real kiss between us, and it felt like a promise, like a beginning. When we finally pulled apart, both breathing harder, he rested his forehead against mine. 2 years, he said quietly. Give me 2 years to arrange everything properly, to ensure you're protected through the transition. And then, he pulled back to look at me fully, then I'll be free, really free, and we can be a real family. 2 years, I agreed, committing to a future I'd never imagined wanting. But Jinwoo, you start now, not tomorrow, not next week. Now. Now, he promised, and kissed me again to seal it. True to his word, Jinwoo began the careful process of extrication immediately. Over the following months, I watched him gradually shift his focus from the shadowy aspects of his empire to the legitimate businesses that could sustain us without the constant undercurrent of danger. The changes were subtle at first. More time spent in meetings with lawyers and accountants, less time with the men who spoke in coded language and carried weapons beneath expensive suits. New partnerships with conventional investors, slowly replacing the connections that tied him to the underground economy. He moved carefully, maintaining enough presence to avoid appearing weak, while gradually transferring power to people he trusted. It's like dismantling a bomb, he explained one evening at my apartment, Lily asleep in her room while we reviewed his transition plans over tea. Pull the wrong wire too quickly and everything explodes, but do it correctly, methodically, and eventually you're left with something harmless. How long do you think it will actually take? I asked, studying the timeline he'd drafted. Realistically? 18 months if everything goes smoothly, maybe 2 years if there are complications. He looked up, his expression serious. But Maya, even after I'm officially out, there will always be echoes. People who remember who I was, what I controlled. Former associates who might ask for favors. That never entirely goes away. I know, I said, because I'd been preparing myself for that reality. But there's a difference between echoes and active involvement. As long as you're not putting us, in the center of that world anymore, we can handle the shadows. Us, he repeated, a slight smile touching his lips. I like how that sounds. Get used to it, I replied, reaching across the table to take his hand. Because you're stuck with us now. As spring turned to summer, and summer to fall again, our lives settled into a pattern that felt increasingly normal, despite its unusual foundation. Jinwoo spent more evenings with us than apart, often arriving with groceries and helping cook dinner, his presence in our small apartment as natural as breathing. Lily's attachment to him deepened. She'd long since stopped asking if he was going to be her daddy, and simply started treating him as if he already was. The restaurant continued to thrive, but Jinwoo hired additional management to handle the aspects that didn't directly interest him, freeing both of us to focus on what we enjoyed, creating excellent dining experiences and building something sustainable. He acquired 2 more restaurants over that first year, all legitimate ventures, all gradually replacing the income from his less savory operations. By the time Lily turned 8, Jinwoo had successfully extracted himself from about 60% of his former activities. The remaining connections were the trickiest, long-standing alliances that required careful negotiation to exit without offense, territories that needed to be transferred to others without creating power vacuums, debts of honor that demanded settling before he could truly walk away. "Someone named Park wants to meet with you," I told him one evening, reading from the message Mrs. Park had left me. "Says he's willing to take over your remaining territories in exchange for a consultation agreement. Whatever that means." Jinwoo's expression was carefully neutral. "That's good news. Park is reasonable, powerful enough to hold the territory without challenges. If he's offering clean terms, that eliminates one of my biggest remaining complications." "So you're meeting with him?" "Tomorrow, at a neutral location." He hesitated, then added, "I'd like you to come with me." I looked up sharply. "Why? I thought you kept me separate from that side of things." "You are separate. But this meeting is about transition, about legitimacy. Having you there, representing the future I'm building, makes a statement, shows Park and anyone else paying attention that I'm serious about changing direction." The idea made me nervous, but I understood the symbolism. "All right, if you think it will help." The meeting took place at an upscale hotel's private conference room, neutral territory where both parties could feel secure. Park turned out to be a man in his 50s, distinguished and soft-spoken, accompanied by his own advisors. The conversation was conducted primarily in Korean, with Jinwoo occasionally translating key points for my benefit. What struck me most was the respect with which they treated each other. This wasn't a hostile negotiation or a power play, but two intelligent men working out terms that benefited both parties. By the end of the meeting, they'd agreed on a framework that would transfer Jinwoo's remaining territories over 6 months, with consultation fees that provided him continued income while freeing him from active involvement. "That went well," Jinwoo said as we left the hotel, his hand at the small of my back. "Better than I'd hoped." "You looked relieved," I observed. "I was. Park is honorable, smart. With him managing those territories, I don't have to worry about chaos or violence filling the vacuum when I leave. That was my biggest concern, that extracting myself would harm people who'd relied on my protection." "Because you're not just walking away," I said, understanding. "You're ensuring continuity, taking care of your people even as you leave." "Yes." He glanced at me. "Does that make sense to you?" "It does," I admitted. "You're not abandoning responsibilities. You're transferring them to someone capable." "That's honorable, Jinwoo." Something in his expression softened. "I don't feel particularly honorable most days. But for you, for Lily, I want to be. Want to become someone you're proud to be with." "I'm already proud of you," I said softly, "for choosing to change, for choosing us." By the time another year passed, Jinwoo had successfully extracted himself from everything except one final obligation. A consulting role for the organization that had originally brought him to America, that had helped him build his initial power base. This connection couldn't be severed, only redefined. But even that was changing, his consultations becoming less frequent, more focused on legitimate business advice than criminal strategy. Lily was 9 now, thriving in school, surrounded by friends who knew Jinwoo as "my mom's boyfriend who owns restaurants." She'd stopped asking when he was going to officially be her dad, seeming to understand instinctively that the labels mattered less than the reality of his consistent presence in our lives. "I've been thinking," Jinwoo said one evening at dinner. He'd moved most of his clothes into our apartment months ago. The transition so gradual we'd never officially discussed him living with us. It had simply happened. "About making things official, legal." Lily's head snapped up from her homework. "You mean getting married?" He smiled at her directness. "Eventually, yes, but first..." He turned to me, his expression serious. "I'd like to adopt Lily. Legally become her father. If you're both comfortable with that." The question hung in the air. weighted with meaning beyond paperwork. This was Jinwoo choosing full commitment, full responsibility. Not just the fun parts of parenthood, but the legal, permanent, unbreakable connection. Yes, Lily said immediately, before I could respond. Obviously, yes. Can I change my last name? Lily Kim sounds cool. I laughed, tears gathering unexpectedly. What about you keeping Reynolds as a middle name? Lily Reynolds Kim. She considered this seriously. That works. Then I have Mommy's name and Dad's name. She said it so casually, Dad, as if the title had always been his. Jinwoo's eyes met mine over Lily's head, asking the real question. I nodded, unable to speak past the emotion in my throat. He'd earned this. Earned her trust, her love, the right to call himself her father. Then we'll start the paperwork tomorrow, Jinwoo said, his voice suspiciously thick. And Lily? Thank you for trusting me. I promise I'll spend the rest of my life earning that trust. I know, she replied with absolute confidence, then returned to her homework, as if we hadn't just rearranged our entire family structure. The adoption process took 6 months of paperwork, home visits, and interviews. By the time the judge finalized it, Jinwoo had been functionally Lily's father for nearly 2 years. But something about making it official, about the legal system recognizing what had been emotionally true for so long, felt profound. Congratulations, Mr. Kim, the judge said with a warm smile. And congratulations to you, Lily. You have a father who clearly loves you very much. I know, Lily said again, that same absolute confidence, making everyone in the courtroom smile. That evening, we celebrated at Hanul, now expanded to 3 locations, all managed under a corporate structure that was completely legitimate. Chef Min prepared a feast, and the staff who'd known us since the beginning raised glasses in toast to our newly official family. Later, after Lily had fallen asleep in the car on the drive home, Jinwoo carried her up to the apartment we'd moved to 6 months prior, larger, in a better neighborhood, with a room for Lily that she'd decorated herself and a master bedroom that Jinwoo and I finally, officially shared. Are you happy? He asked after we'd tucked Lily in, the 2 of us standing in the doorway of her room, watching her sleep. Extremely, I replied honestly. Are you? More than I ever thought possible. He pulled me against his side, his arm around my shoulders. 2 years ago, I was just a man moving through life without purpose beyond accumulation. Power for power's sake, money for security, respect through fear. And now? I prompted. Now I'm a father, a partner, someone building something real instead of just protecting something temporary. He looked down at me. You and Lily gave me that. Gave me a reason to become better than I was. You were already good, I said. You just needed permission to show it. 6 months later, Jinwoo proposed, not dramatically but perfectly, during a quiet dinner at home with just the 3 of us. He presented a ring that was beautiful without being ostentatious, asking the question while Lily watched with barely contained excitement. Will you marry me, Maya? Make official what's already true in every way that matters? Yes, I said, slipping the ring onto my finger, feeling the weight of it like a promise. Obviously, yes. We were married in a small ceremony 6 months after that, 3 years almost to the day after that first meeting in a hospital corridor. Just close friends, the restaurant staff, Mrs. Park, who cried, surprising everyone, and Lily as our flower girl, beaming with pride in her fancy dress. At the reception, Chef Min approached with a glass of champagne, his usually stern expression soft. You saved him, he said simply. Gave him reason to leave that life. I didn't think anyone could. He saved himself, I corrected. I just reminded him why it mattered. 5 years after that first hospital encounter, Jinwoo was completely legitimate, his consulting obligations fulfilled, his final connections to the criminal world severed. He'd become exactly what he claimed to be: a successful restaurateur and property investor, wealthy but respectably so, influential through business acumen rather than implied threat. Lily was 11 now, excelling in school, taking piano lessons that Jinwoo sat through with paternal pride, even when her practice sessions made his ears ring. Our life was normal in ways I'd never expected. School pickups and parent-teacher conferences, family dinners and weekend movie nights, the comfortable routine of people who'd built something real together. "Do you miss it?" I asked Jinwoo one evening, the two of us alone on our apartment balcony, Lily at a sleepover. "The power, the intensity of your old life?" He considered the question seriously, then shook his head. "No. That life was about control through fear. This," he gestured toward the apartment behind us, toward the life we'd built, "is about creating something worth protecting. There's no comparison." "No regrets?" "Only that I didn't find you sooner." He pulled me closer, his arms encircling me, that I wasted years building an empire I didn't actually want, instead of looking for what really mattered. "You found us eventually," I reminded him. "That's what counts." As we stood there watching the city lights, I thought about that terrified woman in a hospital corridor, counting $50 and praying for a miracle. I thought about the mysterious man who'd offered help without expectation, who'd seen potential in a desperate waitress and given her opportunity to prove it. I thought about how the most important choices in life sometimes look like mistakes, how the scariest doors sometimes lead to the best rooms, how the people who transform us most completely are the ones we never see coming. Jinwoo had started as my savior, became my employer, transformed into my partner, and finally settled into being simply my husband. The man who read bedtime stories to our daughter, who managed restaurants with the same precision he'd once applied to territory disputes, who'd chosen love over power and never looked back. "Thank you," I whispered against his chest, feeling his heartbeat steady and strong. "For what?" "For stepping into that hospital corridor. For seeing us when we needed to be seen. For choosing to stay." His arms tightened around me. "Thank you for letting me. For believing I could be better than I was. For building this life with me." We stood there in comfortable silence, two people who'd found each other in impossible circumstances and built something extraordinary from the fragments of our separate struggles. Our daughter slept safely in a home filled with love and security. Our businesses thrived through honest work. Our future stretched ahead with possibilities that had nothing to do with danger or subterfuge. We were free. Really, completely free, and that freedom was sweeter than any power Jinwoo had ever wielded, more valuable than any empire he'd ever commanded. Because we'd built it together, one careful choice at a time, one act of courage following another, until the life we had was better than any life we'd imagined. And it had all started with $50, a desperate mother, and a mysterious man who decided to be better than he had to be. Sometimes, I thought, as Jinwoo kissed the top of my head and we turned to go inside, the universe really does give us opportunities. And sometimes, if we're brave enough to take them, they transform into everything we never knew we needed.